Welcome back to AI on the Record. I'm your host, Jennifer Woodard. There's a moment happening right now across industries, across roles, where the rules of work are quietly but fundamentally being rewritten. The entry level tasks that used to teach you how to think are disappearing, and the tools that once felt experimental are now expected. In communications, an industry built on human judgment, relationships, and nuance, that shift feels especially personal. So, what happens when AI doesn't just support work, but starts reshaping how expertise is built in the first place? Today on AI on the Record, I'm joined by Erin Salisbury, Director of Intelligence and Analytics at FleishmanHillard in London. She spent the last 15 years at the intersection of data, insights, and communications, helping global organizations understand people, what they think, how they feel, and how narratives move. In this conversation, we talk about what AI is actually changing inside the communications industry, from the rise of AI powered workflows and synthetic audiences to the quiet erosion of the junior talent pipeline. And we also get into something deeper: what it means to build a career in a moment where the path forward isn't clear anymore, and where human judgment may just be the last true differentiator. Let's get into it. Hi, Erin Salisbury. Thank you so much for joining us here on AI on the Record. How are you today?
Yeah, doing well, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thanks a lot. Now, Erin, I wanted to just get a little bit of a background for our audience on who you are and what you do.
Yeah, of course. I am a director in the intelligence and analytics function at FleishmanHillard in the UK, in London, which is a global PR and communications agency. I've worked in the sort of insights, data, and analytics space, particularly in sort of the comms industry for the last 15 years, starting in the US, then kind of moved over to the UK about 10 years ago. A lot of my experience lies within using data from social and digital sort of sources to guide communications strategies, corporate reputation, tracking issues and crises, understanding audiences, and helping to measure the impact of communications for clients across many different industries, but most recently spending quite a lot of time in the sort of technology and healthcare sectors.
And yeah, wow, Fleshman is huge, and also part of a larger group now. And it seems like you kind of have the perspective of a lot, like you said, a lot of different industries, a lot of different sorts of trends that are happening in the communications industry. And of course, I'm assuming that AI is disrupting your industry as it is disrupting almost every industry. What is the biggest way you think AI already changing the communications industry today?
Yeah, I think at this point, AI is a must-have skill. We're on the cusp of it for so long in terms of who's adopting it early. Are we sure that it's safe? Can we make sure that the data is protected? And now we're in a position where you have to upskill yourself. There's just no question about it. So I think that's the sort of first big thing is professionals from the start of their career through to very senior and tenured advisors, they are really needing to get to grips with what AI can do, and not just for the sort of automation and sort of efficiency aspects, but equally, how can you turn it into something you can sell? Because that's what our industry is based off of, right? Products and services. So I would say there's a large sort of focus, I know, in our organization and across communications around just even how do you use it, and not just use it, but robustly, safely, ethically within the guardrails of which we really should be using it. So I would say that's kind of the first thing. There are some other kind of obvious areas, specifically in communications around automated content. You can you can train an agent to think and act like an executive or a brand and have it be a sparring partner first round draft. Obviously, would always recommend that you apply a critical eye to whatever the output is, but it does make things faster. It makes artwork creation faster, changing of assets faster. So its scale and its speed, which is great, but it's obviously a very different way of working. And it's an expectation now. What I think is also really exciting about it is that it is starting to democratize things that I think felt quite scary for people before. So coming from the world of data and insights and people automatically thinking, "Oh, I'm not a numbers person," or I don't understand how to kind of do this research that you do. Chat GPT, deep research. We have colleagues that are just living in it. And I'm not saying it's the only source you should use for anything, but it does allow people to elevate the thinking, make space for time for true counsel, sort of true ideation, true creativity. So fast tracking areas that used to feel really manual and time consuming to then hit the same deadline, but actually you've had so much more time to think about sort of what the spine of what it is that you're um looking at. And I guess to the point, I guess the first point I made about everyone's using it now, like a lot of industries, there's this sort of perception that AI can do a lot of the work of what an entry level or junior level person might be able to do in the comms industry when it comes to drafting press releases, codifying content, taking meeting notes. So, like all these like kind of things where you really cut your teeth in your first jobs figuring out how this world even works, and you're getting the exposure to people who have more experience. And um, I worry about what the future of communications consultancy is going to look like, because right now, like we're coming to a point where there's no junior talent pipeline. What is how are we going to fill our mid-manager positions in 10 years, 15 years, our senior positions? So I don't think that a lot of these challenges are necessarily obviously specific to comms, but um, there's overarching themes that I think in comms I can see the impact of AI as well.
Yeah, and I think it's definitely not just isolated to comms. I was speaking with, I think it's the head of the vice president of training for IBM on another interview, and she was telling me the exact same thing. Like the expectations of the skill set for an entry level person in any industry these days is elevating. And this aspect that you just mentioned about cutting your teeth and really like understanding the industry that you're getting into, like right out of college, we're just going to skip it, right? And it's very foundational for how you progress as a professional in this area or in any area. So that's a really interesting thing because I'm seeing it across lots of different industries. When you talk about relying on these types of tools, that positive aspect of freeing up human thinking time and creativity is really interesting. I don't think I'd ever heard that before. Lots of people talk about, AI as like an assistant to do, mundane tasks, but I've never actually heard anyone hone in on that. So that's really interesting. So there is some sort of a reliance on AI now. What sort of things are the teams actually relying on? Is it more for this type of mundane task type of thing, freeing up time, or are there actual things that you guys have deployed that aren't just experiments that your teams are actually relying on for other kind of more strategic pieces?
Yeah, it's both, right? I think the dip your toes in the water first, sort of getting used to the use of AI is an efficiency kind of play in your day-to-day work. Of really small things like helping you craft emails and circulating meeting notes and all those kind of things. But um where we're actually starting to see AI kind of deliver value is sort of building agents that really ladder up to the type of strategic thinking that we want to be delivering, and helping with that, what I would call sort of the mess finding phase of like when you might start a big strategic project like that. What are the sort of rocks that you need to collect and then codify and organize? And what is it coming out on the other side to then help you get to where you want to go, whether that's proving a hypothesis or proving a hunch that you might have. So the ability to use AI to synthesize a lot of data, and then the work I do, really unstructured data, like conversations. How are people thinking? How are they feeling? What is the impact of some of the decisions that are being made around them? And using AI driven tools and technology to help start to codify that and determine, things like which of these sort of conversation areas are the biggest, which ones are growing the fastest, which ones are areas where we know our clients can help, can address with their USP. So that's all stuff we've always been doing, but actually We don't have to now think for hours about how we write a Boolean search query to capture that conversation and then spend loads of time cleaning before we can get a clean enough data set to actually make a decision. It's just all being fast tracked in our sort of world of insights. And I think it's really exciting because, like, again, it's just that's the stuff that I mean, I'm glad I learned how to do it and I know how to do it, but actually now that I don't have to do it and I can spend more time sort of thinking about, okay, what does this mean? What does this mean for us, for the client, for, society? What does it mean and how can we use it? I think that's what's really exciting. And I guess in terms of the second part of your question around are our teams using it, what's the like kind of output looking like for us? Our focus is really on in our world, what are the problems that we're trying to solve? What are the things that are taking us a lot of time? What are things we could never do before because the technology didn't exist or there just weren't enough people or resource like and then how can we use AI based tools, build agents, connect those in a workflow that gets you from A to B faster um and still checking and making sure it's all correct, but we're putting that into practice now, and that's after the off the back of probably a solid year of experimentation and things not working, and things are still not working, things are still breaking, but I think we're getting closer, and we're really excited about the direction of travel at this point. It's quite energizing, I think, at the moment.
So is this what you're referring to? Is it mostly internal tooling that you have built within the organization, or do you also rely kind of on external tools for these types of tasks?
Yeah, I mean, we're relying on the large scale LLMs for a lot of them in terms of ChatGPT, Gemini, etc. And we're not a software company, so we're never going to build a sort of necessarily tech that we would sell in the sense of a social listening tool or a web scraper or whatever that might be. So we are pretty, I guess, at the moment reliant on data and technology from others, but we're we're also sort of entering a lot of partnerships and thinking about how we can work together for, mutual benefit to create stuff.
Yeah, and when you're talking about agents, workflows, I'm assuming that some of the stuff that, you're doing is emulating kind of the human roles and responsibilities within like a comms or an insights team. Are there certain parts, and I assume so, are there certain parts of these roles that you think are kind of the most vulnerable to automation, which are actually becoming kind of more important?
Yeah, I think thinking about areas like market research, for example, there's like a really big conversation around synthetic audiences, synthetic data, which is obviously in theory based on real people, insights, behavior, and data. But then how far does it drift away from that the more you use it? And I'm still very much of the camp of like you shouldn't be making big decisions based on a panel of synthetic data that has like no crux of real people thoughts, emotion, nuance, feeling in it. But I think it is something that people are starting to consider. So I think just like the world of market research is quite vulnerable, and there are organizations out there that have shifted their entire business model to make sure that they're keeping up with, how AI is evolving and what can be done and the information they have from decades and how they can then train the models to again really think and act like people in a way that's robust. So I think that's like one interesting area again just in the world that I'm living in. I also think, stepping outside what I do, the world of journalism is obviously just changing completely. Like AI as an audience, whether that comes to how is my organization's financials going to be picked up by the AI investor newswires that actually more people are reading now than who go and read the FT or Barron's or whatever. That's a whole new kind of area that we're having to explore and beyond media as well. Obviously, our every organization in the world is worried about how they're showing up in LLM searches and how that is related to SEO as well. So I think it's bringing the kind of parts together to create a whole. But I think those would be the kind of two things: market research and journalism in general, which yes, changing very quickly.
And that last little piece about journalism, I'm sensing a little bit of trepidation. I was wondering if you think about the ethical risks related to implementation of AI at this scale. Like, are there things that worry you? Is it disinformation, automated persuasion, deep fakes, those types of things? Are those things on your mind, or anything else like that?
Yeah, all the time. Like you reading about what's happening on Grok. And I think I was just reading a study about ChatGPT and the bias in the LLMs. So I think it is kind of always on my mind in the background. And I think from a um professional point of view around ethics, as in making sure that when we're building something based on data, it's either publicly available or that individual has given consent, right? You're not feeding anything into an LLM that you shouldn't be. Making sure that like protected data, personal information, all that kind of stuff is in fact staying protected. And those are guardrails we definitely 100% have up in our work, but not everyone in the world does that, right? So there's things like that that I do worry about. I think more broadly, when it comes to AI, I'm worried about the tech bubble bursting. I'm worried about the concentration of wealth that AI is driving, and the sustainability of our climate, or the future that we're going to be living in. Like these really big things that feel too big sometimes um, to think about or feel like you can really do anything about as one person. But the train's left the tracks, really, in terms of AI. So we just have to do what we can, I think, to be good people and steward AI in the right direction.
Yeah, it's what's on everyone's mind, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it does feel like we're living in some exponential moment that we'll either look back on it and be happy about what we did, or we'll be, in a situation where we're really regretting that we didn't do more as a
Mm,
society. And I say that as a person who works in AI. That's really interesting. So coming up on that, does that mean you're kind of more optimistic or concerned about the long-term impact of AI, both on the industry and in general?
I think I'm skeptically optimistic, like somewhere in the middle. But I think there are people much smarter than me developing these tools and processes and this sort of future state that we all sort of have to put our trust in some kind and hope that the sort of good of humanity prevails. I do think it is really exciting what can be done with AI. The flip side of all of the really strong efficiencies that it can drive, how you remotely monitor a wind turbine, or I don't know, pick your sort of example around, being able to write a code that helps us get to where we want to go in a lot of other areas of the world and society. So I think from like a professional perspective, it feels very odd to live at a time where you don't really know what the future's gonna hold. And obviously there's always that element, right? But I think until AI really hit the scene in a lot of industries, there was a kind of certain pathway that you took in your professional career, and maybe you took a sidestep or a lateral move, but in general, you kind of had an idea of like where you started, where you might go, etc. But now it's just sort of like who knows what the future is going to hold, and who knows what things we're going to all need to upskill ourselves in and make the time to do that, and on top of our day jobs. So yeah, it's a long-winded answer, but I think there's some good and some bad, and some I want to be optimistic, definitely.
Yeah. I think that's just mainly the consensus across everyone that I speak to. Just high level of excitement,
Mm.
a little bit of stress, right, with the frenetic pace, and a lot of mixture of optimism and trepidation. So I think you're speaking the same language as most people across all of the industries. So yeah, you're right. It's just about adapting skills, and also adapting to the implications and the potential negative outcomes that might be brought on by these innovations. So
We're talking a lot about the term of agility, obviously, and I think no other time that I can think of where I've had to really embrace that. And to your point, you just have to adapt and quickly.
yeah, especially when we're thinking about an industry like the one that you work in, right? It's such a legacy industry with practices that have been adopted or consolidated over many, many, many decades.
Mm.
maybe it was kind of like when the internet came on the scene, everybody was like, "Now what do we do?" Right?
Yeah.
Or social media.
Yeah,
But it also seems bigger than those things to me somehow, right?
definitely.
It's like the sea change is a lot more impactful than those two really huge moments for like comms or the marketing and insights industry. Yeah, I mean, I can't imagine what it's like for you on a daily basis dealing with all of these changes, but it sounds like you guys are staying a step ahead of the game and really getting your hands dirty because that's one thing that of course, you're saying you rely on these LLMs that you're
Yeah.
not a technology company, but the high level of adoption that you have within the industry is really impressive.
Yeah, I think it's been such a core focus and, I think every major company is going through a digital transformation right now and taking different approaches to that and deciding on the best routes to do that. Do you go wide and just tell everyone, just try it and see how it goes and then like rein people in? Or do you really focus on a core group of super users who then have a lot of pressure to do everything? And there's a lot of different ways in which I think you can approach this. But I do think on a personal level, anyone who's not interested and engaged is going to be in trouble if they aren't already really in whatever role they're in. Because I think the one thing that the AI of today can't really do is woo another individual, build
Mhm.
a solid relationship, foster that relationship, gain the trust, bend the ear, to the point where, you've got a person saying, I've got this huge problem and I don't really know what to do. You can ask the AI, but it's not going to be the same as you going to your trusted advisor with 30 years of experience in this exact specific thing and can recall time and time again where they've addressed this and the different approach that they took and what the outcomes might be and help you predict what's coming out on the other side. So when it comes to things like consulting and advising from a comms, perspective or otherwise, I don't think the AI of today can do that. It might be able to tomorrow, sooner than tomorrow. But I think right now, not so much. And it doesn't have the same context of the world, right? So when a lot of the work that we do is around forming messaging that people understand, that resonates with them, that they're hearing it the way you want it to be heard, that it's a connecting point. Those are all things where, to your point about using it as a sparring partner or a buddy and fast tracking, getting to this point, yes, but I do still think in our industry at the moment, there is the need and space for our human brains.
Yeah, and thankfully.
Thankfully, yeah.
I'm really happy about that. Yeah, no, and I was speaking with another guest about something very similar, and we were talking about kind of the lack of humanity in some of the creative outputs that come across
Mhm.
and how they can come across as kind of unsettling or
Mhm.
uncanny. And that's where I think, yeah, that human touch is just, at least right now, as you say, it's just irreplaceable, right? The ability to convey emotion, the ability to actually produce something that's going to resonate with another human being is, yeah, we haven't scratched the surface on that, thankfully.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it sounds the industry is safe in that regard for a long time. Yeah. Wow.
Hopefully
Okay.
a long time. I don't know, we'll see. But yeah, there's certainly and I think we may have discussed this before. I've talked to others about it as well, but this perceived value of a lot of what people in sort of my industry, the creative industry do, like to your point around AI driven sort of assets and creatives, you know, um, this idea that everything should be so much cheaper and you shouldn't be paying as much or thinking as much about those things. And I think that is pretty tricky because I guess to my earlier point, a lot of what we're building is all based on unique knowledge, sort of IP of myself or my colleagues, um, based on our real world experiences. And we can't just, we don't want to just be handing that over for nothing. I mean, that feels very like, doesn't feel good to think that you start selling that for like, peanuts, especially when, as individuals, a lot of us our work is kind of who we are. And I think for people my age, older, like, I don't know, I've dedicated a lot of my life and my time to this. And yeah, to get to this point where you're all of a sudden like, oh, but a machine can do. And that, I mean, I'm sure people felt that way during the Industrial Revolution, so what do I know? But, like, yeah, it's an odd time. It really is.
But it can't. That's the thing. I guess what you're getting at also is like the now you have a need to actually communicate to customers or stakeholders that the perceived value is still the same, right? Like your value is still the same. It's coming from, decades of experience, all of these different kind of, pieces of knowledge that you've obtained along the way, and that just cannot be replicated currently. And
Yeah,
hopefully, yeah, that is the same across again all industries. I speak to people in the journalism industry; they feel the
yeah,
same way. Do I really want to be handing over, my writing to an LLM that's going to be indexing it and spitting it out in a different way? And what is the impact on the integrity of journalism in that regard? I mean, it's just really, it's everywhere. This same kind of feeling is everywhere that you feel this kind of risk of your perceived value going down, right? Just based off of these technology innovations.
yeah, definitely. I definitely sort of feel that way, and I think that's also why, sort of talking about it sometimes feels like you can't necessarily offer the most unique point of view because I think we're all grappling with these
Yes.
problems and these challenges. I'm part of a steering committee in the social intelligence space, and it's very interesting to hear people across agencies, brands, tech vendors, and suppliers, like academics, who are trying to prepare, to your point, like their students for entering the real world. And yeah, it's I guess at least sort of like we're in it together. But yeah, it's moving so fast. It is a bit hard to your point, to stay a step ahead or to feel like you're staying a step ahead.
Yeah. Well, you're not behind. We're
Yeah,
all
but I really don't think we are. I do agree with that.
No, we're all grappling with the same questions, and hopefully we'll all come to the same good answers or good solutions
Mm,
to some of the challenges that this is posing for all of these different industries. So,
mm.
well, thank you, Erin, so much for joining me today. It was a fascinating conversation. Really, really enjoyed it. Thanks for being on AI on the Record.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, there's a line that Erin said that's kind of hard to shake. That right now, the one thing that AI can't do is build real trust. Not just generate language, not just simulate tone, but sit across from someone, understand the stakes, and say, here's what I think you should do and why. And maybe that's where this moment lands. AI is making everything faster, it's making some things easier, it's even making some roles less necessary, let's face it. But it's also raising the bar on judgment, on relationships, on what it means to actually know something and really know it. In industries like communications, where meaning and perception are everything, that human layer isn't going away. It's just going to become more visible. So it isn't a question about whether AI will change the work. It already has. The question is what we choose to double down on in response. Thanks again for joining us on AI on the Record. If you enjoyed this episode, follow along for more conversations at the edge of how AI is reshaping the way we live and work. Thank you for joining us yet again. Bye-bye.